What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Well, tonight we continue the exploration of how the 12 steps impact our self-concept and our self-esteem. And, we spent over a year looking at how the 12 steps help us discover and achieve emotional sobriety. And then we spent some time talking about how the concept of differentiation from Murray Bowen relates to emotional sobriety and is a good lens, a good way to look at emotional sobriety. And now we're pivoting and looking at the importance of self-esteem and how it is essential to the experience of emotional sobriety. Now, we started with step one. We spent some time really, unpacking that step in the therapeutic forces that have an impact on our self-concept and therefore on our self-esteem. And I really love how the discussion really started to focus on self-acceptance as being the prerequisite for change. And we had to accept our powerlessness and our unmanageability. Two ideas that were cognitively dissonant to us before coming in the program. Bill even recognized this. No person, he said, no, every natural instinct cries out against accepting our powerlessness. So we know there's going to be an incredible amount of resistance to embracing these things that do not fit with our idea of who we are, that do not fit with our self-concept. And this is the gift of pain. It starts to deconstruct our false self that creates this consciousness of self-reliance, this consciousness that Father Richard Rohr called an imperial self, right? This consciousness that's based on I have to control everything in my life to be okay. A consciousness that's based on I'm okay if things go my way. I'm okay if I get my way. I'm okay if things happen the way I think they should happen. I'm okay if things go the way they're supposed to go, which happens sometimes, but not all the time. And then what do? Well, because we're so fixed that things have to be a certain way, we just get upset, we object, we get caught, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to experience a personal freedom in the face of this bondage to this idea, to this self-concept that we've nurtured our whole life, and that was nurtured with all the experiences we have, with all the ideas from our culture, et cetera, et cetera. I love that line that we are all victims of victims, and we are all victims of this culture. I mean, it's just, that's the bottom line in terms of what's happening. So we talked about that each step creates a charge. It creates a certain amount of energy. Here I have this problem in my life. I have alcoholism if I'm a recovering alcoholic or addict. I have addiction, and I'm powerless to do anything about this, which leaves me, in quite a lurch, right? It's quite a situation I find myself in. My life has become unmanageable. I don't know what to do about that either. So what happens is the charge that's created here is this existential crisis. I need to let go of what I've been doing. I need to start to evolve my consciousness into something that is going to work better in my life, but I don't have that yet. I'm not there. that existential crisis is loaded with existential anxiety. I'm in trouble and I don't have the resources yet developed to do anything about it. Well, this is the incredible wisdom operating in the steps. Step 2 resolves the existential crisis that was created in step 1. And it does that by instilling hope in us. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Sanity, as you've heard Herb say, and I've said many times, is really a condition of a soundness of mind, a necessary condition for mental health. Could restore us to sanity. None of us had soundness of mind. When I expect everything to go my way to be all right, that's not sound thinking. That's not based on reality. That's based on a set of assumptions and ideas that I've really clung to, thinking that this is the way life is going to work. So as I start to deconstruct my self-concept, or the foundation of my self-concept, I need to be opened up to some new possibilities. Step 2 is the opening to these new possibilities. It's the opening to the development of a new consciousness, of a self-concept that is not based on what our self-concept was based on before, this idea of control. This idea that life has to conform to my expectations. So we start to answer the question, well, what is the foundation for our self-concept? What was it based on before? And we've explored that. We talked about that in some of the previous things. What is the foundation underlying our self-esteem? Well, it's all those things that were related to our self-concept. Now, we must ask ourselves these questions as we start to explore this. Does our self-esteem, the way that where we're at right now, the self-esteem I've had coming into the program, does it empower me in my life or diminish me? Well, if I'm really honest, in step 1, it diminishes who I am. It has not helped me live a better life. Does my self-esteem enhance my experience in life, or does it diminish me? Well, my self-esteem diminished me. It didn't enhance anything. Did it create an increase in my sense of personal efficacy or my sense in my personal agency? No, it didn't. It diminished it. Did my self-esteem create a consciousness of freedom, or a consciousness that was subversive to any kind of personal freedom? And of course, the consciousness I had was subversive. I love the image that Herb shared at some of the workshops, and several of the workshops that we did together, when he talked about us being, puppets on the end of these strings that we created. We hooked ourselves up. We turned ourselves into puppets, which is a crazy thing. How can a puppet, turn themselves into a puppet? Well, we did it. That's what we did. So we want to start to think of the self-esteem that we need to develop in our life as a self-esteem that helps us get aligned to reality. Another way that I've heard it said is that we learn an appropriateness to life, that we learn how to respond and to deal with life as it is, and find the answers to the challenges and the tasks that life is setting before us. So this step, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, starts to develop a commitment in us to awareness. It develops a will to understand, and this will become the central pillar of our self-esteem, is this development of a curiosity. What's going on here? I love the term that Thom Rutledge used several times. We develop a reasonable doubt that the way that we've been thinking about things isn't working. And we start to become open to some new possibilities. Step 2 is creating hope that there are new possibilities that our current lens doesn't help us see. So it's the beginning of taking this lens off and starting to try on some new lenses, new ways of looking at ourselves, new ways of looking at our problems, new ways of thinking about our relationships, new ways of thinking about the kind of relationship we have with life. So that's going to start the beginning of our discussion of this powerful step. Let me invite Roger and Thom and Herb in with me, and let's see what they have to say about step 2 in self-esteem.
Hey.
Hey, Thom. Hey,
Hi, Roger.
Is Herb with us tonight?
I am.
Good.
Yes.
Very good to see you, Herb.
You just said it and he appeared, Roger.
I know.
My God.
All right. Go ahead, you guys. Fire away. I'm set to listen for a few minutes here.
Well, I think this is two things. No, I'm just kidding. Second step to me is absolutely about humility. And when I look at the pillars, I see living consciously. You know, I can hit the second step into to do my little connection to each of the pillars of the 7 pillars of self-esteem. I can make a bit of about every bit, but I'll stay with living consciously. And to me, I'll just say it this way: how I learned to approach the second step from the very beginning always made the most sense to me. And it is, the briefer version is, I am not God. You know, it's just that. It's like there's 2 parts of the second step. You know, it's like there's a power. I come to believe a power is greater than me, which is just the confrontation to our own arrogance. And, you know, and that's in that pseudo self-esteem is what you're talking about, Alan. that those are the notches we have to, you know, be taken down, you know. And it's like it's so powerful to realize that there is great relief in understanding I'm not God. There's something more than me. And I love that about, you know, people. And I love what Bill says in the 12 and 12, which is step 2 is a rallying point for us all. He says at the end of that, atheists, former believers, agnostics. It's like it's just that whatever version there is of that. Even, you know, I am a power. You know, there's a power greater than me. A power greater than me that I'm looking at on the screen is me plus the 3 of you guys, or me plus the 3 of you, 148 people here. This is a power greater than me. It doesn't have to be anything metaphysical. It doesn't have to be anything even spiritual about that. But that's so important and to me. And it's like that's the place where I think without that, there is no self-esteem. So I'll leave the second part to you guys to talk about how the hell that power is going to restore us to sanity. But I love knowing I'm not God.
Herb?
Okay, I'm Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Alan, for setting us up and also quoting Thom. I hadn't heard that before. Reasonable doubt, because it was the key, actually, to my experience. Many of you know that I studied to be a Catholic priest for 7 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know some spiritual stuff. And so when I got into the program, I had no problem with step 2. In fact, I blew by steps 2 and 3, twice going through the steps with mechanics, with deeply spiritual experienced people. And at 10 years of sobriety, this man said, would you be willing to set aside? That was the key. And reasonable doubt is just such a great synonym for that. And it struck me tonight that chapter 4 in the big book is, in fact, we agnostics. That's about reasonable doubt.
Yep.
It's interesting. And so I went through, and I won't go through the entire process, but he asked me 2 questions. And this is anybody who's been in any of my workshops has heard these 2 questions, so it won't have as much dramatic effect as if you have never heard them before. It was the curtain parted for me. And I discovered that I was, in fact, a practical agnostic. The 2 questions are, well, what do you believe, Herb? Go home and give me a page on what you believe. I went home. I wrote this wonderful thesis, a poetic, mystical, God, it was so gorgeous. And I came back and I read it to this guy, and he said, oh, Herb, you ought to get that published. That is so good. Now I want you to go home and write a second question, an answer to a second question. How do you behave in light of how you believe? Well, I knew on the drive home I was screwed because there was no coordination, or very little, between what I said I believed and how I acted. And for the very first time, because of the set-aside attitude, I do believe that, I was able to see that my concept up to that point was the very impediment to my relationship with the mystery. My concept, with all the traditional theology and philosophy support and understanding and behavior. The interesting thing is I'd had 2 prior journeys through the steps, and I had a powerful spiritual awakening with no connection to steps 2 or 3. So it doesn't matter what you believe. It does matter what you do. And when you do as if you believed, something happens anyway. And that actually reinforced the sense that, okay, so I have some doubt in terms of practical doubt, but now I can follow the instructions of the big book, and I can create my concept, not my theology's concept, not my philosophy's concept, not the big book's concept, not anybody. I can develop, what do I need at this point in terms of a relationship with this mystery? Again, it obviously deepened and the sense of self-esteem, because I saw in step 2 that we're becoming conscious of constant contact, which led to me a whole level of meditation that I will get into right now.
Yeah. Love it.
Well, thank you, guys. I want to read a little bit from step 2 in the 12 and 12, because it connects so directly to what particularly you, Thom, and Herb were saying in terms of difficulties swallowing the second step for so many people coming into programs of recovery, right? Or in this case, coming into AA, and how he would answer those things. First, Alcoholics Anonymous does not demand you believe anything. This again is directed at people who are struggling to be open to the idea of a higher power, and restoring themselves to sanity. All of its 12 steps are but suggestions. Second, to get sober and to stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step 2 right now. And that's part of what Herb was just saying. It matters far more, I would soften it a little bit probably, it matters far more what we do than what we say we believe, because our capacity for self-deception around what we think we believe is unbelievably huge from my perspective. If we have any humility at all, or any ability to see even a little bit of ourselves clearly, our capacity for self-deception is immense. I want to repeat that one. To get sober and stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step 2 right now. Looking back, I find that I took a piecemeal myself. Third, all you really need is a truly open mind. Just resign from the debating society and quit bothering yourself about such deep questions as whether it was the hen or the egg that came first. And that again speaks so much to me to what Herb just said. We can all have different ideas, different concepts of a higher power. For some people, it's God. For some people, it's nature. For some people, it's our higher self, our best self. For other people, it's, you know, a sense of just reality as best we can perceive it. And that Nathaniel Brandon, we've talked a lot about his concepts of self-esteem, and you know, Nathaniel did not have room for God in his writings about self-esteem. He viewed it as an irrational and fundamentally, therefore, unhelpful aspect to trying to approach building our self-esteem and self-worth. But he does refer at a couple points to self-esteem and the growth of self-esteem as a spiritual process, So that is one of the connecting points to me. My own ideas, I'm not sure what my ideas are, and I'm only 72, so maybe if I live to be 99, I'll be a teensy bit less sure, but honestly, probably not, okay? Because the best I can do right now is there are so many aspects of reality that I come up against every day that I feel powerless regarding. That's when related to step 2, but where I recognize that reality is a power far greater than me. I can't snap my fingers and change things. I can't walk through that wall behind me because I want to. I can't have somebody fall in love with me because I want them to. I can't even make myself fall in love with somebody just because I think I should or want to. I mean, there are so many aspects of life, aspects of reality that are more powerful than I am, way more powerful than I am. So that to me is where the idea of however we visualize or conceptualize, if it's in words, our idea of a power greater than ourselves, it sets in motion a process that encourages open-mindedness, that encourages humility. That's what Bill says in the last paragraph in the 12 and 12. As Thom said, therefore, step 2 is the rallying point for all of us. Whether agnostic, atheist, or former believer, we can stand together on this step. True humility and an open mind can lead us to faith. And every AA meeting is an assurance that God, or your sense of, as you understand him, as we understand him, right? Your sense of a higher power, will restore us to sanity if we rightly relate ourselves to him. So the way that I work with that is came to believe that a power greater than myself with which I choose to align myself.
That's it.
With which I choose to align myself can and will restore me to at least some measure of sanity. On any given day, I have a long way to go, okay? But it's my alignment with that sense of whatever it is, higher self, God, higher power. That's the critical issue to me. He talks a lot about objections people raise, whether it's defiance, whether it's disillusionment, whether it's, prejudice, because, I see so much hypocrisy, he writes, for this person, in terms of people who profess strong religious conviction. All of that goes by the wayside if we take this idea of letting go of the debate society, just starting to put into action those principles or beliefs that are going to help me grow my self-esteem. Those 6 principles, or 7, as we've talked about, 7 pillars, 7 practices of self-esteem, and then see what happens. See, that's the attitude that Bill is really encouraging. Don't believe? Okay, don't believe. But put these principles into action and see what happens. That's the curiosity that Alan was referring to. That's
Right.
the desire to understand. So I'll leave it on that note, but thank you guys very much. Every one of you deepened and expanded my understanding of this. So thank you.
Well, I can tell
Amen.
the next few weeks are going to be really a lot of fun.
It's a powerful area where a lot of people have a lot of prejudice and a lot of emotion. It's
Sure.
a really loaded area. And the word alignment, I think, is the key. Alignment with reality is as simple as I make it. Alignment with reality. That's the key to emotional sobriety, but that's the key to the answer to the question of steps 2 and 3. Just alignment with reality. And I love what you just said because it's so practical. Try it, see what happens.
I love Alan. If you guys pay attention to the chat, Alan T every week comes in with he's a member of Narcotics Anonymous, and he comes in with some great quotes from there's a great book called Living Clean, The Journey Continues in NA. And then listen to what he says. One of the definitions of sanity that they have is that sanity is living in harmony with reality.
Yeah.
Sanity is living in harmony with reality.
Yeah.
When we are spiritually awake, we are willing to see clearly.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. You know, the first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. You know, we're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.